Hey everybody, it's Greg back to here and welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to talk about one of Sony's newest cameras, the FX3, except it's not really a new camera, and I'll get into that in this video. Also, stick around to the end of this video. I want to show you this cool app that you can use as a monitor on your iPad for your Sony or Panasonic cameras. I think you're really going to like it, so stick around for that. Anyway, let's get into the video. Now, I mentioned the FX3 isn't really a new camera, and it is and it isn't. Now, on the external side of things, it appears to be a new camera, but internally it's exactly the same as the Sony A7S III camera with one difference. It has S-Cinetone included, but I've heard a rumor that there's going to be a firmware update for the Sony A7S III which will give you S-Cinetone. So essentially internally they're the same camera. Alright, so let's have a quick look at some of the key differences between the Sony A7S III and the Sony FX3. So obviously the body is different. Now one of the key things is the Sony A7S III, you get an electronic viewfinder. And with the FX3, instead of the electronic viewfinder, you get the XLR adapter, which allows you to hook up your mics and record. Now that's an optional feature for the Sony A7S III, and the electronic viewfinder, that's an optional accessory for the FX3. So that's one of the big things, is one comes with different optional accessories that the other doesn't. So if you're someone who likes an electronic viewfinder and you're not so concerned about paying extra to add on the mic attachment, then this might be the better camera for you. On the other hand, if you like to rig out your camera, if you like to add a cage and you like a lot of different attachment points for your mic and maybe an external monitor, maybe a handle, then the FX3 is designed more for that, so that you don't need a cage to add all these different components to. You can add them directly to the body. Also, it's more designed for videographers. Now, this little toggle allows you to zoom in and out on certain Sony lenses, which is pretty cool. And then also they have the buttons pre-labeled. Like you can see here, one is for that, white balance on number 2, ISO number 3. You don't get that zoom function. That's just an on and off switch in the same location. But you can customize each of these buttons that you see here. So you see C2 or C1 or C3. You can go in the camera menu and you can assign the exact same features to all of the buttons. So it would work very similar to the FX3. So these are some key differences. Now also too, as of February 25th, internally, the FX3 comes with the S-Cinetone picture profile, and the Sony A7S III does not. If you're enjoying this video and you're finding it helpful so far, hit that like button. It really helps my video get more views. Thanks. I've just recently purchased the Sony A7S III, and this came out, and it's very similar, but there's some differences. And I'm kind of in the window where I could actually return this and get the FX3, so that was something that I've been thinking about. But for what I'm doing, I think this is totally fine. The Sony A7S III, it's totally fine for me, but I can see for some people who would want to rig it out with a cage and add a lot of different parts, and where the external mic is more important than the electronic viewfinder, then definitely I would go with the FX3. But personally, I like the electronic viewfinder. Some people say that they don't use it, but it really is a different way of composing an image or a scene when you look through that viewfinder than the back of your screen. Alright, so what should you do? Should you get the FX3 or the Sony A7S III? Internally, they're pretty much the same camera. Like I said earlier, that there is a rumor that there'll be a software or firmware update for the Sony A7S III that will give you S-Cinetone. So technically, it's the same camera. So it really comes down to what type of body style. So do you like using electronic viewfinder, or would you be okay without it? Is an external mic setup more important to you, because that's included with the FX3 and it's not included with the Sony A7S III. So it really comes down to, do you need that viewfinder or do you need that external mic? What's more important to you? If you can live without an electronic viewfinder, then I would go with the FX3. I personally enjoy the electronic viewfinder. I find it useful. And as far as rigging out my camera, I don't usually get a cage and go all crazy with that. I like to just put my camera on a gimbal and go. So I can see why, if you're the type of person that has a cage and a bunch of attachments, why the FX3 would be probably a better option, because you can attach them different components to the camera body, and that saves you the trouble of having to get a cage and adding extra bulk and extra weight. So if that's more your thing, where you don't need the electronic viewfinder and you know that you're going to get a cage and external mic, then the FX3 is probably the better one to choose. Now, as far as the video quality and all the other features, like I mentioned in this video, it's the same as the Sony A7S3. So there's a good video by Brandon Lee where he walks you through this behind the scenes that he shot, and the video is great. So if you're not sure if the quality's what you're looking for, make sure you check out that video. I'll put a link to his video below this video. Now, I wanted to talk about the monitor app. Now, I'll leave a link to that too. I'm not affiliated with it in any way. I've been using it for years now. I was using it on my Panasonic GH5, and I'm also using it on the Sony A7S3. And it allows you to control your camera. Now, I know the imaging app for the Sony also does that, but one feature I like about this is this app has a waveform monitor. So if you've used that in the past, it's hard to live without. And that's one thing that I find strange, that the Sony A7S3 and the FX3 both don't have a waveform monitor. Like, why don't they have that when the Panasonic GH5 had that like 2-3 years ago? So that upsets me. But with this app, I can look at the video on the iPad, I can check out the waveform monitor, and where that's helpful is if, say, you're going to use a color checker, which I do. Now, if you're shooting an S-Log3, this is sort of a deeper topic, and I'm kind of going on a tangent, but we'll get back to this, and also I'll shoot a video about exposing for S-Log. But technically, you're supposed to expose this gray one right here, middle gray, at 41% for S-Log3. So if you have a waveform monitor, you can just hold this up and you can really nail your exposure in the studio, on location. So it's really helpful because in camera, you only have access to the zebras really and the histogram, and I just find that the waveform monitor is a little more accurate. So I'll put a link to the monitor app below this, and you can use this on an iPad or an iPhone, and I find it really useful. Now, there's a few things that weren't included in the Sony FX3 that I thought would be. Now, one would be an internal ND filter, because it is a cinema camera. I thought that would be something that should be in there. Two, a waveform monitor. If you're used to using a waveform monitor, that's very helpful for setting up your exposure. And three, I also thought that should have the shutter angle, the 180 shutter angle. The fact that that's not on there, it's kind of strange, because you see that on something like a Panasonic GH5, which was a micro four thirds camera, came out 2-3 years ago. It had a waveform monitor, it had the shutter angle. So I would have liked to have seen those things included on the FX3, and they're not. So I found that kind of confusing, but I guess they want you to upgrade to their higher end cinema cameras for those features. I guess that's maybe their thought process. If you enjoyed this video and you found it useful or helpful, just slam that like button for me right now. It really helps this video get more views, and I'd really appreciate it. So take a second, hit that like button. Hey, and subscribe if you want to. It's up to you. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. It's Craig Becta, and I'll see you in the next video.